If the universe is in part made of some kind of invisible fluid, according to fluid universe theory, could it be possible that black holes like the one at the center of our Milky Way galaxy are serving as the equivalent of nanofluidic inlet valves, pulling in everything that falls within their gravitational grasp? Could it also be said that spiral galaxies like our Milky Way are playing roles as spiral microfluidic lab-on-disk and chip devices of the type that we will be comparing spiral galaxies to in this video? This includes what are called spiral microfluidic nanoparticle synthesis reactors, which are structured and sort of kind of function like microfluidic laboratory-on-chip devices, as you bear in mind that star, planet, and moon formation transpires in the arms of spiral galaxies like our Milky Way. Whether or not there are two galactic central black holes, the stars, planets, and moons and other matter in our Milky Way galaxy are generated within and flowing through our Milky Way galaxy's spiral arms, as if through the spiral rings of inertial and centrifugal microfluidic nanoparticle reactors and laboratory on-chip devices. And with us starting by focusing on lab-on-chip devices, while assuming that there is only one black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Microfluidic chips are biomedical and scientific research tools that are made with patterns of molded or engraved microchannels that include some kind of inlet and outlet holes that serve as links between the microchannel network and the macro environment. These devices are used by doctors and scientists to detect, identify, process, and analyze cells, DNA, chemical particulates, and other matter at the microscopic level. This includes cellular and DNA and RNA separation and purification, amplification, sequencing, and synthesis, plus metering and filtration of molecules in what are a few applications. Plus, we also need to note the locations of the inlet and outlet valves that we see here in these devices, with the location of the black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy comparable to the location of a central inlet valve, with the location of our solar system comparable to the location of the outlet valves, and with us obsessing on the significance of the location of the central black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy relative to the position of our solar system in its mathematically perfect location inside the spiral Milky Way galaxy, in which the stars are also circulating in orbit around the central black hole, which is a huge hole that sucks in all matter that falls within its gravitational grip at some point, including entire suns, planets, and moons. The solar system appears to be an integral part of some kind of gigantic microfluidic recirculation device we call the Milky Way. And this actually makes sense when considering that billions of years from now, all the matter in the Milky Way galaxy will eventually be broken down at some point. And much of this matter will be recirculated through the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, including the dust and ashes of our long-dead planet, and even our bodies themselves. And there are no two ways about this. Our Milky Way galaxy is some kind of recirculation system, and we are part of this system, I suspect. Also consider that the internal structures of the suns, planets, and moons are mirror images of the structures of living cells. all of which are structured like what are called multifunctional nanoparticles, like these here, with the internal nuclei and nucleoses of these nanoparticles and living cells and suns, planets and moons, and even black holes being structural mirror images of each other, and respectively serving as DNA and RNA. With the black hole nucleus of our Milky Way galaxy playing its role as the equivalent of a gigantic cell nucleus, pulling in the equivalent of cellular nuclei inside the cores of suns, planets, and so forth, the significance of which you can ascertain yourself on your short and strange trip around the Sagittarius A black hole at the center of our Milky Way, supposedly. Now let us have a closer look at the inlet valves of these microfluidic devices that I am presenting in no particular order, with the black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy being the only comparison I will use here, although the galaxy is full of black holes, by the way. And we can see in these pictures how the supermassive black hole at the Milky Way center is pulling in dust, gas, and entire planets and suns and so forth. This dynamic is no different than the way the inlet valves in the microfluidic devices you see here pull in cells, DNA, and chemical particulates and other matter for processing, separation, sequencing, analysis, etc., and sometimes even redistribution elsewhere. Some of these fluidic devices that you see fall into the category of nanofluidic devices, but I am not going to differentiate between microfluidic and nanofluidic, except to say that the operational parameters of nanofluidic devices are 100 nanometers and smaller, and are often used in conjunction with microfluidics. With this example of a microfluidic to nanofluidic gradient interfacing area being compared to the dynamics of black holes and the space that surrounds them, with black holes playing their role as the equivalent of nano interfaces from the much larger micro-macro universe as they pull in all matter within their gravitational grasp, including smaller black holes that are often swallowed by larger black holes, with the Sagittarius A black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy falling perfectly into place here in We can also see once again how the flows of the stars and dust and gas through the rings of our Milky Way galaxy are mirror images of the flows of cells, DNA, and particulates and other matter flowing through the inner and outer rings of spiral microfluidic biosensors and chemical sensors and processing lab-on-chip devices like the ones you see. With the location of the black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy comparable to the location of a central inlet valve, with the location of our solar system comparable to the location of the outlet valves in these devices, it seems that the similarities between the structure and dynamics of these spiral microfluidic lab-on-chip devices and spiral galaxies like our Milky Way are too similar to be coincidental, especially when we focus on the relationship of their central black holes to the orbital flows of atoms and gas, dust, and even suns, planets, and moons through the inner and outer spiral arms of the Milky Way in orbit around a central black hole. It is also significant that the chemical composition of these devices include lots of silicone, glass, and other elements that scientists have detected in abundance dispersed throughout our Milky Way galaxy. And as previously noted, some specific applications for some of these lab-on-chip devices include genetic and chemical particulate identification and manipulation. Without forgetting the fluidic nature of the universe, all the microfluidic lab-on-chip devices you see here are based on a concept called inertial microfluidics, which is based on a concept called hydrodynamic lift, which helps move fluids and the matter within these fluids through these devices built-in microfluidic structures in a dynamic that I presume would have something to do with the formation, movements, and locations of the stars and planets and moons through galactic rings. There is absolutely no difference whatsoever between the flows of dust and gas and even the suns, planets, and moons through the rings of spiral galaxies and the flows of DNA, cells, and particulates through the rings of spiral microfluidic lab-on-chip devices. There is absolutely no difference whatsoever. This brings us into another area of discussion where we will now compare our Milky Way galaxy with what are called centrifugal microfluidic lab-on disks. Which do almost the same thing as inertial microfluidic lab-on chips, except that lab-on disks use centrifugal force to move fluid through their microfluidic structures. Keywords: centrifugal microfluidic lab-on disk platforms. These devices operate under the same principle as computer disks insofar that spinning biodisks store, track, and manipulate cells, DNA, and particulates in spiral and near-spiral tracks or channels, just like computer disks store and manipulate data in spiral tracks. Centrifugal disk and data disks also respectively rotate at speeds that range between hundreds of revolutions per minute. The 4 or 5 or more rings of our Milky Way are estimated by astronomers to rotate at their own varying speeds each, which supposedly vary between 200 and 250,000 kilometers per second. This translates into an average speed of 8.5 million miles per second, I think. The Milky Way galaxy is spinning at a dizzying speed, just like a centrifugal microfluidic lab on a disk, with ourselves as just another set of specimens on the disk we call our Milky Way galaxy. I also need to include the concept of black holes that supposedly riddle our Milky Way and other spiral galaxies, and that supposedly link different regions of space via their wormholes and white holes in some kind of interconnected network, just like centrifugal microfluidic disks have networks of inlet and outlet holes and channels that serve as links to various parts of the disk and the macro environment, respectively, including inlet valves for active flow control of fluids and a set of structural dynamics that appears to mirror the structural dynamics of our Milky Way and other spiral galaxies. And let us not doubt for a second that the powerful centrifugal force generated by the spin of our Milky Way galaxy would have something to do with the location of our solar system and ourselves right here at the tail end of the Orion arm or spur. This means that the Orion arm or spur harbors the nebula from which our sun and the rest of our solar system was birthed from the placenta of molecular hydrogen clouds and other matter, in a process that took billions of years, with the centrifugal spin of our Milky Way somehow resulting in our solar system's mathematically perfect location in our Milky Way. Key words: mathematically perfect location. Like the equally mathematically perfect locations of the sample and detection chambers in these microfluidic lab-on-disc biodiscs, including destination and mixing and waste chambers and so forth, that we can see built into these devices, with the central black hole of our Milky Way being in just the right place to serve as the sample inlet and loading chamber and ports and so forth. Where these comparisons become even more shocking, pun intended, is when we consider that the Milky Way's Orion arm or spur is in the exact same location relative to the shock interface in this centrifugal microfluidic blood plasma extraction or separation disk, as we bear in mind that star formation is transpiring in the Orion spur or arm, in part because the galactic centrifugal force is pulling stars outward and together into a bunch that collide and explode, with their violent shock waves expanding outward and collapsing the surrounding molecular clouds into protostars, which eventually form adult stars around which planets and moons accrete and form into solar systems like our own. And as I start wrapping up this video, let us briefly explore how scientists and engineers have recently merged centrifugal microfluidic biosensor disks with what are called microsphere biosensors, like these here, with the Milky Way galaxy being the biosensor disk, with the Earth playing the role as microsphere biosensor, and with the Earth being the only example I will use, although any other living planet or moon would suffice. The synthesis of lab-on-disc biosensors and microsphere biosensors is just another method used by doctors and scientists for disease detection. This means that the Earth is a little biosensor merged with a much larger biosensor. We have a little machine inside of a big machine, inside the machine of the universe at large. The Earth, more specifically, appears to in part be the equivalent of what clinical scientists and doctors call a microsphere resonator spectroscope biosensor. And all life forms on Earth are the equivalent of gigantic cells in the microsphere biosensor we call Mother Earth. As specimens inside of a microsphere that appears to in part be based on a sensing technique called cavity enhanced spectroscopy and sensing, which includes optical microcavity based sensing, with the sun being the obvious light source, with the moon appearing to be playing the role of the optical pickup sensor in these examples. And with me concluding this video by saying that I included a link to my playlist of videos that will help place things in perspective for you, and that I'll postulate that the universe is made of bits and pieces of technology. And if you like this video, hit the like button, share and subscribe, and hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I upload a new video.